Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to our Sound of Hope. I'm Roberta Cook, President and CEO of BH Care. We've gathered together every year to recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month for the last 21 years. And while I'm disappointed we can't be on the pier this year, I'm grateful we can join together virtually to remember those who have tragically lost their lives to domestic violence, to celebrate those who have survived, and to honor the women and men who dedicate their time and their careers to bringing an end to domestic violence once and for all. The coronavirus has shifted the landscape of our work, but we remain committed to providing comprehensive services to survivors and their families. In fact, over the last year, we've helped almost 8,000 victims and their children take steps toward rebuilding their lives, free from fear and free from violence. This October and throughout the year, let us be mindful of victims of domestic violence and remember those who have tragically lost their lives to domestic violence. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank Esperina, especially our director of the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence, and all of her incredibly dedicated and passionate staff for their commitment to our mission and the individuals and families we serve. And now I'd like to turn the ceremony over to Esperina. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are, as Roberta mentioned, we are gathered here virtually, not at the pier. And we've been doing this for over 21 years. And we really do this to support and honor the victims and survivors of domestic violence, and really bring together our partners that are working in the field with the hope of helping individuals and hopefully end domestic violence one day. Annually, we serve victims. Every year, the number seems to be increasing. Last year, nearly 8,000 individuals at the umbrella and within our domestic violence services. Our goal is really to increase awareness of domestic violence and its effect on the community, and really get those who are being victimized and the services that they need, and to really bring social change and eliminate domestic violence. We believe that everyone should live a life free of violence in their homes, in their community, be able to walk like everyone else and get to work and get to live in an environment where they are happy, and they can bring children about where they will live a life free of violence. So right now, while we do this, I'm happy to introduce State Representative Claridis, who's serving in her 10th term, which is for Woodbridge, Arlington, Derby. She was the first woman to serve as her caucus leader, and she was re-elected leader again in 2016. As a minority leader, Ms. Claridis is a member of the Legislative Committee and on the Legislative Management. State Representative has supported the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence for many, many years. She supported us at event that fundraising event where our voice needs to be heard. She represents us at the Capitol, and we are so grateful that she's able to be here with us today and remembering those who has been affected by violence. State Representative Claridis, please.
Oh, Esperina, I don't know if you can see the messages, but that is available for the next 5 minutes or so.
Oh, so now we will move to the next section of our event. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Gunjan Tiagura. She's an associate professor of pediatrics and of emergency medicine at the Yale University School of Medicine. She is the associate program director of the Pediatric Emergency Medicine Fellowship and a clinical researcher interested in improving detection of child abuse and developing interventions to improve family violence. She has 4 children, ages 2 to 7, who keep her busy at all hours, and she loves to run, read, and spend time with the people she loves. She's most grateful to work in New Haven with people who inspire her to be better every day. Thank you, Dr. Gunjan.
Hi, thank you. I'm so honored, there we go. I'm so honored to have this opportunity to speak with you all today, even though it's virtual, and want to especially thank Cindy Carlson, from whom I have learned so much about intimate partner violence, and specifically about how healthcare providers should approach survivors, and the importance of advocating and meeting a survivor where he or she is on her journey. I was asked to speak today about the children who are living in homes with intimate partner violence and who are often considered its silent victims. So I want to start first with a child many of us took care of in the hospital. Let me tell you briefly about a very sad case of a 2-month-old baby girl who presented to an emergency room after she was found, after she had stopped breathing at home. When the baby arrived to the ER in an ambulance, she was lethargic, had bruising to her back, had skull fractures and brain bleeds, had injuries to her spine, and had multiple healing broken bones. In the hospital, we learned that the baby lived with the mother and the mother's boyfriend, who was not the biological father, and that the mother had moved to the United States 4 months prior, so really did not have any social supports in the area. Despite many discussions with the mother, she did not initially provide any history of the baby's that could explain the baby's findings. And finally, after seeing her baby in critical condition, she revealed that she herself was a victim of intimate partner violence and that her boyfriend had repeatedly choked, punched, and kicked her. He took away her cell phone whenever she tried to call for help. She had called the police several times prior to this event, but had declined evaluation each time. And no one had independently evaluated the baby during these calls. Finally, at a multidisciplinary meeting in the hospital with the baby's doctors and social workers, she revealed that her boyfriend had held the baby in a football hold and might have smacked the baby's head into a door, that he often picked the baby up by her feet and swung her around repeatedly. This baby was sadly diagnosed with severe and life-threatening physical abuse, and over time, the baby was discharged to a rehab facility for her many chronic care needs. As pediatricians, we often care for, diagnose, and intervene on behalf of children. But the truth is, this baby was suffering from family violence, of which intimate partner violence was a big component. IPV, as you all know, is complex, and its impact extends beyond the partners and can cause significant physical trauma and emotional injuries to the exposed children. Although the prevalence and adverse health consequences of child exposure to domestic violence are well researched and known, this public health problem is infrequently emphasized. More than 15 million children in the US live in families in which IPV occurs, and approximately 7 million children witness severe violence, such as one parent using a weapon in the assault of another. Many studies in which caregivers and children have been surveyed also reveal that child abuse co-occurs with intimate partner violence as often as 30 to 60% of the time. Children's experience of IPV can certainly occur in different ways. They can be directly exposed to the IPV, whether they're present in the same room that it's occurring, whether they're accidentally injured, or whether, like this baby, they're actually abused, leading to feelings of fear, anxiety, and depression. Or they can be indirectly exposed due to a caregiver's depression, trauma symptoms, or changes in parenting. Children who have experienced intimate partner violence have higher rates of a myriad of physical health problems. Common diagnoses such as asthma occur more frequently and with more severe presentations in children exposed to IPV. Social and emotional health are similarly adversely affected by experiencing intimate partner violence. In fact, early childhood represents the greatest period of vulnerability to stress-related changes in the brain because of the tremendous brain growth that occurs during this time. Even exposure in infancy, as early as infancy, can cause serious problems with learning and harm to emotional health. If we continue to treat a child's medical problems or mental health issues without addressing the underlying IPV, the ability to change the course of these problems is going to be greatly stymied. I work with our child abuse team under the leadership of Dr. Andy Asnes to improve recognition of child abuse in acute care settings across the state. Through our work, we have identified many children who have been abused, neglected, or suffered emotional trauma due to ongoing intimate partner violence in the home. These cases for us have highlighted how victims of family violence are often sorted into systems that fail to address the family as an integrated unit, leading to missed opportunities to mitigate ongoing and prevent future family violence. We therefore started a clinical pilot program to understand the risk of abusive injuries in young kids exposed to IPV. When children were reported to DCF after exposure to severe IPV, we arranged medical exams for these children in our ER and trained our ER social workers to assure that they provided IPV-related resources to the caregivers. Simultaneously, we developed our New Haven Family Violence Community Advisory Boards, consisting of members of organizations like The Umbrella, Hope Family Justice Center, CCADV, DCF, the New Haven Police Department, the Child Study Center, social workers from the hospital, and an IPV survivor herself, who meet regularly to provide input on the work we are doing, to make sure we are equally considerate of the children and the caregivers who are both victims of this family violence. I would like to highlight just the power of the Community Advisory Board and what we have learned together. Board members have taught us and each other about so much about the impact of IPV on a family, and specifically on the abused parent in a home. They have raised concern that EDs may not provide a trauma-focused environment for victims of family violence, and proposed the development of a novel integrated care model of IPV, linking a child's medical evaluation with an opportunity to engage and connect the caregiver to a community-based IPV advocate. While a survivor, due to so many reasons, may not seek care for herself, she may be motivated to do so for her children. And we hoped to use that opportunity to link her to necessary resources for herself and her family. As a result of this work, we have implemented an integrated care clinic at the Child Advocacy Center in New Haven, in which Dr. Asnes provides medical evaluations for young children experiencing IPV, while Cindy Carlson provides advocacy services for the caregiver. The program has been active over the past few months, was of course delayed due to COVID, and on follow-up conversations, caregivers have described an overwhelmingly positive experience and felt that they were able to have their needs addressed while feeling reassured that their children were uninjured. We've also worked diligently to provide mental health follow-up for the children and their caregivers. Having started this work has made me realize just how much more there is to do, but also that this work cannot be done alone. IPV, child abuse, and really family violence deserve a family-centered response from all of us in the community who care for children and families affected by this type of violence. I thank you all so much for this opportunity to speak with you about the children impacted by this major public health problem, and hope we can continue to work together to help families and mitigate the impact of family violence. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't know really who's next on the agenda, but I'm going to butt in because Themis is back. Themis, I'm not sure if you heard your introduction, but I think probably you did. So you can take it from here. Thanks.
I didn't hear it, Roberta, but I'm sure it was wonderful. And I want to thank you. And
Sorry about that.
I apologize. I was in the middle waiting for a COVID test and I had to wait an hour after the appointment I had. So I apologize again for messing up the schedule. But I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with these great people for so many years. And I have to tell you, it's one of the best experiences I've had. I'll say that legislatively, we've been able to do a lot of good things, but there's a lot more work to be done. You know, we hear people talk about COVID every day and how it's affected businesses and how it's affected the economy, and clearly how it's affected people's health. And those are certainly the most important things and very important things, but we sometimes miss the other areas that have been affected by COVID, which is one of them has been domestic violence, and how there's more domestic violence and people aren't able to get as many services as they've gotten in the past. But places like BH Care have done such an amazing job of changing their model as to how they were dealing with clients before and how they're getting those services just as well now to the clients that need them, particularly in this very, very difficult time. So thank you again for all you've done. I'll just mention a few things that we proposed during the legislative session this year that clearly weren't done, and we'll have to wait till next legislative session. But one of the bills that we put in this year in the House Republican caucus was a bill that allowed women, victims of domestic violence, to access temporarily state services without having to have their abusive partner added as part of that income to be able to access the services. Because we all know that if you're in a violent situation and you have to actually be part of your partner's financial situation just to access the services you need, that just leads to more violence in many circumstances. So that was something not only put in during regular session, but we begged, I will say, the governor's office to allow us to take that up during special session last week, and he was not interested in that. So I'm hoping that there'll be more pressure put on him next session, and I will certainly continue to do that. So again, thank you, Doctor, for your wonderful words, and congratulations on all you've done. Thank you, BH Care, for what you've done, and I look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you, Representative Clarides. We truly appreciate your consistent support for our work. And now we've asked our partners in law enforcement to join us today to recognize the critical role they play as first responders to domestic violence calls. We are grateful for their dedication, compassion, and commitment to this issue.
When responding to domestic violence in our community, it's on us to build trust and to provide the necessary information to victims and their children to prevent future occurrences of violence.
When it comes to responding to domestic violence in our community, it is on us to treat you with respect and compassion, to thoroughly investigate your domestic violence complaint, to take appropriate action, and to support you during the criminal justice process. So I encourage those who are impacted by domestic violence to reach out to us so we can be there to support you during this most difficult time of your life.
When responding to domestic violence in our community, it's on us to be the servants in our society to protect and be the lifeline for victims who feel they have no voice.
When it comes to responding to domestic violence in our community,
cuando se trata de responder a la violencia doméstica en nuestra comunidad,
it's on us to stand up against domestic violence and stand with the victims.
Está en nosotros de pararnos en contra la violencia doméstica y pararnos firme con las víctimas.
When it comes to domestic violence in our community, it's on us to educate you, to ensure you know the difference between a healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationship.
Violencia doméstica es algo serio, no tienen que vivir con miedo.
When it comes to responding to domestic violence in our community, it's on us to respond with a professional, victim-centered approach, aiming to ensure the safety of survivors and their families. We assist them with compassion from the onset of the initial call, making sure a full investigation is completed, arrest procedures are followed, safety plans are developed, additional resources are provided, and we ensure there is an understanding of the criminal justice system. The partnerships we have built with the victim advocacy services within the greater New Haven community allows for an enormous network of support. We strive to strengthen the foundation of trust and public confidence that we have built within our community. We encourage the reporting of these serious crimes, and we know these incidents not only affect the individual, but also their families and our community as a whole. It's on us to work together to end domestic violence.
When it comes to responding to domestic violence in our communities, it is incumbent upon us to respond to domestic violence both with safety and with an open mind and compassion. Also to recognize the signs of domestic abuse and the associated dangers and traumas that both directly and indirectly impact the victim and family members. And to work cooperatively and collaboratively with our partners at the umbrella to provide critical support and safety planning strategies to protect those victims. Thank you.
Each year, we recognize law enforcement officers who have come to the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence Services attention for their dedication to the domestic violence victims in their communities. The following officers are receiving a certificate of appreciation for their compassion, understanding, and hard work to support survivors of domestic violence. First is New Haven Police Department, Detective Chevelle Carr, Officer Jennifer DePiano, Officer Claire Reiser, Officer Stephen Spofford, Sergeant Michael Fumiati, Officer Matthew Vernick, Officer Kevin Blanco. From the Ansonia Police Department, Officer Walter Podgorski. From Derby Police Department, Officer Frank D'Angelo, Sergeant John Netto. From the Guilford Police Department, Officer Heather McPhillips. From North Haven Police Department, Officer Kristen Fitzgerald, Officer Massimo Paroli. West Haven Police Department, Officer Victim DeSimone. Hampton Police Department, Officer Ronald Clifford. Milford Police Department, Officer Susan Clark. They will each be receiving a certificate of appreciation, and we appreciate all their hard work, their dedication, and the change that they bring when they work with domestic violence victims. Thank you so much for your commitment. I'd like to introduce a staff public service announcement where we have a service-centered portion of our event. We would like to bring the public service announcement from our staff.
I'm Dave Cassetti, Mayor of Ansonia. If you or someone you love is unsafe at home, please remember the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence is here to support you. All of their services are available in English and Spanish and are confidential and free of charge. I urge anyone who is in need of their services to please don't hesitate to contact them. Thank you very much.
Domestic violence is more prevalent than you might expect in Connecticut.
Unfortunately, 1 in every 3 women, 1 in every 4 men, and 1 in every 2 people who are transgender will experience domestic violence on their lifetime.
The coronavirus pandemic has significantly impacted survivors of the domestic violence who may be quarantined or sheltering in place for the person who caused them harm.
Financial instability and financial hardships caused by COVID-19 may increase or exacerbate abusive and controlling behaviors. Given the current pandemic, it is more important now than ever before that we believe survivors, support survivors, and work to end domestic violence through prevention education.
We cannot excuse, minimize, tolerate, or normalize domestic violence. Every single one of us plays a role in creating a healthier, safer, and more respectful community.
If you are concerned that someone you know or love is experiencing an unhealthy, controlling, or abusive relationship, it is important for you to continue supporting and empowering that person. Ask the survivor how they would prefer to connect. Help establish a safe communication channel and check in with them regularly.
Once you've identified a way to connect, be creative and stay in touch. Be supportive and believe survivors. Reassure survivors that they're not alone and that there's help and support available. Empower the survivor with resources.
Remember that survivors are experts in their own lives and are doing their very best to navigate a very challenging and scary situation. If you or someone you love is unsafe at home, the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence Services is here to support you. All services are available in English and Spanish and are confidential and free of charge.
To contact the Umbrella Center, call 203-789-8104 or 203-736-9944.
We are here for you.
Estamos aquí para ti.
We are here for you.
Siamo qui per te.
Here for you.
Nulla po.
We are here for you.
Our next message is from Cherie Baldwin Muhammad, who is a mother of 4, a grandmother of 3, an educator, and a survivor of domestic violence. She is the founder of Ladies in Formation, a member of the teacher policy team through Educators for Excellence CT, owns her own company, and published her first book in March of 2017 entitled Hide and Seek, A Journey to Life. Cherie Baldwin Muhammad is passionate about empowering others to be better physically, mentally, and spiritually. Before Cherie shares her message, I would like to offer a trigger warning to our viewers. The next portions of the event described lived experiences of domestic violence, which may be difficult for you to hear and process. I encourage everyone with us today to practice self-care during and after the event. If you would like to speak to an advocate, we are here for you. Please feel free to call us at 203-789-8104 to speak with an advocate. Without further ado, please welcome Cherie Baldwin Muhammad.
Hello. So I actually wanted to be outside today to speak to you. So my name is Cherie Baldwin Muhammad, and I am a domestic violence survivor. I'm also a teacher and a poet and an author. I published my autobiography about 5 years ago, and it was a combination of poetry and narrative to tell the story of my life. I wanted to sit out here by the water, if you can see the water, because this is a place where I would go during the times that I was going through the different emotions that I went through when I was experiencing domestic violence. It was a place of comfort for me. It was also a place where I wrote a lot of my poetry. So today I'm actually going to read a couple of the poems in particular that really touched upon how I was feeling during this time and the different emotions that I was going through. So the first poem talks about walking around with a smile on my face but having pain inside. I walk around with a smile, I laugh, but no one sees the inner pain of feeling trapped, of not being able to breathe, conforming to the image that I must betray before man, but only God knows the real me. For it is He who really sees the tears I cry. He is the only one who knows my heart as others pass by. I give a smile, a wave, a kiss, a hug, even a word of encouragement. But who is there when I need them? It is funny when you give, and then when you have nothing left, all people ever want is more. So I paint a picture on a blank canvas. I smile pretty for the camera for all to see, hiding what is truly going on inside of me. Because if you could really see, would you still love me? So that poem encompasses how I was feeling, how I was feeling lost, not sure of who I was, and the journey that I took in order to find peace is within this book. And the last poem that I'm going to read talks about the healing process and the different things that I went through in order to heal from all the trauma. Healing is a process, a journey of discovery of who you are and who you long to be. No more playing this game of hide and seek. I am on a journey called life. Seeking God in order to find the real me, desiring to be truly free, desiring to have no more chains of misery. I am loosed to be authentically me. Life is a journey filled with ups and downs, but I am learning each day to look in the mirror and like what I see as I walk towards victory, one day at a time. There's a bee flying around. He's buzzing and trying to find out what I'm talking about. So I just want to encourage you today, find your quiet place. This is my quiet place to sit by the water. Find a place where you find comfort. If you write poetry. if you write stories, if you paint, find what you love to do and do that so that you can be able to come through all of the things that you're going through and be victorious. So thank you for listening today, and may you find peace by the sound. The sound of hope is within your reach and within your grasp. Have a great day.
I'd like to introduce Kathy Sherlock. Kathy is an emergency room nurse, a survivor of domestic violence, and a mother. Kathy founded Caden's Corner Foundation after the death of her daughter in 2018. Caden's Corner Foundation is a nonprofit in Pennsylvania pending 501c3. Kathy has passionately dedicated her time to building a healthier and safer community for survivors and their children through her work as a child custody reform advocate and as the president and founder of Caden's Corner Foundation. We're so honored to have Kathy with us today, and she'll be sharing a bit more about her experiences and work.
Hi, thank you everyone for having me. I'm glad I could be here this year. October is a rough month for me, so to speak. Caden's birthday, October 15th, so my story is long. I'm going to warn you, it does include child abuse and graphic and triggering. I have to tell my story. I've never really told the entire thing from the beginning, but I think I have to start that for this particular event because to show you, kind of how I am where I am now. I'm sitting here in my office, which is Caden's Corner Foundation that I founded in 2018, which we just recently opened. She was killed in 2 years ago, so we've come a long way since that day. I unfortunately have to read, and I'm sorry for that. I don't normally write speeches, or I usually just kind of wing it, and I'm not going to do that today because I'll talk for 37 hours. So I'm just going to start. For as long as I can remember, I've always wanted a family of my own. I grew up relatively uneventful in your traditional Italian Catholic family. My parents have been married for 45 years. Family has always been number one to me. I hope to one day be able to give my own family even a fraction of what my parents gave to us, but I was obviously in no rush. And I also didn't have very good luck in the dating department. I figured it would happen one day when I was ready. But as life has it, things never go as planned. I unexpectedly became pregnant with Caden in the beginning of 2010 at 29, and not by someone I would have wanted to, and not by someone I would have picked. I always asked myself, why him? Of all the people on the planet, why him? Why now? The relationship very quickly became toxic and abusive. I lived in my own apartment until June of 2010. She was born in October. On the third day that I found out I was pregnant, he spit in my face. You would think that would have been a warning sign then. But as people, abusive people, you don't know who they are in the beginning, obviously. If I knew what he was, I would have never, ever even probably gone near this man. Also, most abusers, most people with, his background are very manipulative. They're very charming. They're the ones that have the, the center of attention. They're the ones that need to, and there's a reason why they are that way. But looking back, you'd think they're these charming people, and it turns out they aren't. People always ask me how I chose this, or you chose this partner, or you did this and you should have known. Well, it's very, very hard to know what people's true colors are before you experience them. So I stuck it out with the idea that she should have both parents in her life, thinking that's what I had to do. I have the best father on the planet, and I had no intentions of denying her having both parents if he was willing at the time. But as the relationship and the pregnancy went on, I questioned everything while being tormented about him early on. Was I making the right decisions? I'll always remember someone telling me when I was pregnant with her, when I was questioning everything, even contemplating giving her up or even abortion because he was forcing me to do so, which I don't even believe in that. Someone told me, maybe this is a love that you've been looking for, and there's a reason why, though you may not see it now. Caden was born October 15, 2010. the love of my life. Discovered a love I had never known. She was my world. She was the most beautiful little girl, so full of life. A spunk and a fire inside her like no other. She was beyond her years on so many levels, and I was truly blessed to be her mother. I wished I could have been half the person she was. I removed myself from the situation with her father early on. I left when she was 14 months old. I lived there only to ensure her safety, and I went back and forth due to financial reasons and childcare purposes. I don't often talk about what I went through because I feel as though it minimizes what happens to her. And as a mother, I would have done anything for her. I would have given my life for her, as most parents would. I would deal with whatever it took if it meant my child was okay. Kaden and I moved into my parents' house and life was okay. Eventually I met my husband and had 2 little boys. I now have 3 and we got a golden retriever. Life was good, despite her father in the background. He never let up. At first things were cordial, but over the years it got worse and worse. Lawyers got involved when she was 4 and it ended up in court in 2016. I knew there was something seriously wrong with him, but I had little options of what I could do about it. He was her father, and after all, I had a faith in a system that it would protect her. And as much as I wanted to have her have a normal relationship with her dad, I wasn't dealing with a normal person, and I continuously cautioned her safety. Life went on, as did the court battle. Kaden excelled at every sport she ever played. She had a competitive fire in her that you can't teach. She was a happy child who loved life and her family. She played soccer, basketball, tennis, softball, gymnastics. She had just made the gym 10 youth travel softball team as a 7-year-old. She could have been anything she wanted to be and aspired to be a trauma surgeon. She was smart as could be. She loved making YouTube tutorials, loved her brothers, loved her stepdad, even loved her own father. She was kind and caring and feisty. She loved dressing up and making makeup videos, singing the fight song, dancing and playing teacher. She was a girly girl who could kick your butt at any sport. She was one of a kind and she was a bright light in this dark world. She was my best little friend. I cherished every second I spent with her. I tried to make her life the best I could despite the ongoing battle with her father. I spent years in court trying to get someone to listen to me. It fell on deaf ears. In the beginning, at one point he had smashed my face in with a Playtex bottle over not having formula on every level of the house, which was ridiculous. Anyway, but I was holding her in my right hand. She was about 8 months old, and he threw a plastic bottle at my eye at close range and didn't stop till he saw blood. And eventually when it started to bleed, I ran out of the house with Kaden and I took her from where we were to my parents' house at St. Mary's, and I had my sister come and pick my baby up. And when you get there, the triage nurse asks you if, as a nurse, you're usually, you should call the police for most assaults, but the victim can deny. And the nurse said to me what happened, and I told her, and she says, "Do you want me to call the police?" And I said, "No, he will kill me." And those were my exact words, because he would have. He was always in trouble. He had bitten off a man's ear in 2012 in a bar fight, and that was the same exact time that I actually physically removed myself from the situation and went back to my parents' house. He was found guilty for aggravated assault for that. And he also strangled me on 3 different occasions. And from the research and the stuff that I've been doing since then, strangulation is actually a predecessor to homicide. They've found that in studies. If you have, or anyone strangles or has been strangled, they have a very high rate of being murdered. And he didn't kill me, but he killed her. I'll get to the restraining order part in a little bit, but this is, the story as what happened the day we found out. We know there is substantial history between the mother and father in an ongoing custody dispute. I don't know the details yet, but we do know it was a very contentious relationship. Captain John Ryan, head of homicide in Philadelphia, states in his interview with ABC News, not even an hour after my daughter, Kaden, was found dead. The story hit breaking news on every channel, heard around the country, even internationally. Cameras arrived at my house not even hours later, and the news spread like wildfire. And in almost every publication, the story always recorded or included the custody dispute. The brutal custody battle. The headlines read, "Child killed among custody dispute. Father murders daughter in missed custody battle." No one ever discussed the actual issues at hand, that he was mentally unstable, suicidal, violent, abusive, etc. Just the custody dispute. In the initial news report, you can see them in the background bringing my daughter out in a body bag, as my father looks on in utter despair. He insisted on staying on scene until they took her out, making sure she was handled properly. You can see my husband collapsed on the ground on the other side of the house, hysterical. You see white sheets, crime scene investigators, the medical examiner van, and so on. The brutal murder of a 7-year-old child, like it was a scene out of a movie, but it wasn't a movie. It was my new reality. A beautiful, full of life, amazing, gorgeous, talented, smart, spunky best friend, and all around amazing daughter was brutally beaten to death by her father. He beat her over and over again in the head with a 35-pound dumbbell. Not murdered with a gun as most kids are, but a dumbbell. She was found by the door with her shoes on by my father and husband the morning after she should have been returned home per our court order. She was found by the door because she was trying to get away from the one person who should have cared for her, her own father. And at one point, I had to tell her during what we endured that if she ever felt scared around her dad because of the way he was, I needed her to run and to find an adult and have them call me or the police, run fast, because I knew what he was capable of. But despite my pleas, my worst nightmare came true. She was found by the door, beaten to death. He beat her and beat her and beat her and didn't stop until she couldn't fight anymore. She did fight for her little life. And he beat her till he thought she was dead enough for him. He flipped her over, tied a Wawa plastic bag around her head, and secured it with an iPhone charger to make sure she wouldn't survive. He then washed his hands, took his time to write another 2-page letter as his daughter's lifeless body laid on the floor, and threw it on her dead body. One note stating, "You all get what you deserve." He then went upstairs, made sure his previously written suicide note that he warned the court personnel about was in sight. Took nitrous oxide that he ordered on Amazon, tied a belt around his neck, tied it to the door, anticipated passing out from the nitrous, which would make his body hang himself, and he killed himself. This happened over his custodial weekend that the judge awarded him in May of 2018, just 3 months later, denying my request for supervised visits. 18 months after court proceedings started, and to what the media and all outlets, including the judge and the court system and police involved, all coined as the contentious custody battle. I was the defendant in this case. Court was used as a way to intimidate and control, bankrupt, and punish me. We spent 18 months in actual court, and many years before we even made a court appearance, we had privately hired lawyers attempting to handle the dispute. I trusted the people I hired to help me. I had faith in a system I had no idea about, and they all failed. They all failed my daughter, and she lost her beautiful life due to it. I was accused of parental alienation early on, and I remember receiving a letter from his attorney claiming that I was alienating Katie, and that I was keeping her from him on purpose to be spiteful, because I was a nasty, rotten, spiteful person. And by keeping her from him, he meant that I would not willingly agree to 50-50. That's how it all started in the early years. He would show up when he wanted. He couldn't be bothered with actual parenting duties. He took her when he felt like it, and he did what he wanted. He never once followed a court order. He never once followed any of our agreements. If I said no, I was harassed all day, every day. If he couldn't get to me, he would go to my family. If he couldn't get to my family, he would go to whoever he felt was in his path. He never stopped. He wanted his way, and no one was going to tell him no. No, not a lawyer, court, judge, or police. I voiced my concerns with him over and over and over again. Every evaluator, every paid psychiatrist I was forced to see, every judge I was in front of. I begged them to listen to me. I begged them to listen to what I was saying, to listen to what Caden was saying, trying to get just one person to help me, pleading with my own attorneys. I called everyone I thought, from CPS to the police, to the courts, to the evaluators, the psychiatrists, people at her school, family members, friends, everyone trying to get someone to listen. Well, he's not physically harming her. There's nothing we can do, is what I was told over and over and over again. It fell on deaf ears. Not agreeing to what he wanted made me difficult. Statements released by the AOPC said that we both had questionable behavior. I was and still blamed for the brutal murder of my daughter. Called every name in the book from people all over the world, telling me things like, "Sleep in the bed you made." The judge alone released a statement saying, let this toxic relationship and contentiousness be a teachable moment to all of you. A teachable moment. I have heard from people from all over the world, each one begging me to help them in their own custody issues, asking for advice, sharing stories so similar to what I went through in court, each one saying, I don't want my child to be the next Caden. Tough words to hear. Sadly, I don't have much advice to give them. What I did in court did not work for me. I buried a beautiful 7-year-old after spending thousands and thousands of dollars in a system I had faith in that should have protected her. Parents shouldn't have to bury their children, especially when it could have been so easily prevented. Parental rights in court supersede children's rights. Some people are evil and shouldn't have kids or be around kids or even humans. You wouldn't have been able to adopt a dog but because of his history, but humans were okay. Caden's father's parental rights superseded her right to live. Every judge, candidate, lawyer, or court system I've talked to all say the same thing, that the best interest of the child comes first, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. My daughter was the 647th child killed in custody-related, a custody-related court issue. And every time that a child's killed in our community, the courts or whoever goes back to these communities and says, what has been done to change or prevent what happens? And every one of them says nothing. Why change what they feel is an exception? I don't know if 557 children are considered an exception, but that's a large number. When I was first thrown into the unfortunate land of family court, I knew nothing. I had no advocates at my disposal. I had nobody to help me. The police were called to my house, 4 different police districts over and over again. He used the police to harass me. He used the police to intimidate me, and he used the police to enforce his court order, which they did. They took my child out of my house one time, and nobody ever said anything to him. They always said, take it up with the courts. The night that my daughter was missing, she was supposed to be home by 6 o'clock per the court order. 9 o'clock, I called Philadelphia Police District and said, my daughter's missing. I need you to do a well check on her. They hung up on me and said, ma'am, there's nothing we can do. We're not going to go remove her from her house. You need to take it up with the courts. So my husband and I drove to the house. We got there, the lights were on, the dog was outside, and nobody was answering the door. He wasn't answering the phone, which was very odd because normally he would pick up the phone and curse at me, and something was strange about it. I got to the house, I called 911 4 times, and it took them 90 minutes to arrive. And when they arrived, they would not go into the house. They said that they didn't have a warrant and there was nothing that we could do. They gave me a piece of paper and sent me home and said to take it up with the courts in the morning. This was a Sunday night. I got back to my house with my husband. My dad was watching my children, and I had my father call the other police district that we had always dealt with, and he again said, my granddaughter is missing. It's now 1 o'clock in the morning. She should have been returned home. We can't find her. We can't get in touch with anyone. And again, that police district hung up on my father and said that there was nothing that they could do and that we needed to take it up with the courts. So the following morning, my father and my husband went to the house where they went in, the back door that was open, and found her on the floor, and the notes and everything else. They were taken to the police station to take statements. I think my husband called and they showed up in a matter of minutes at that point. Since then, I've made various public statements. I speak a lot around the country now. I've had my eyes open to a corrupt system that I knew nothing about and I wish I was never involved in. Every single person that I ever talked to says the same things about court. Our family court system is completely messed up. And unfortunately, it's the entire country. Yes, I'm here in Pennsylvania, and we're making lead ways over here. But, as the doctor who spoke earlier, and I've worked as an RN for about 17 years now, we have a job, we have a duty. We are held to standards of, the nursing board, medical boards, etc. Our judges and our judicial system are basically can do whatever they want. No one can hold them responsible. Even the judicial boards are made up of the same types of people as them. So they're never, and it's closed. You're never gonna ever be able to get anything done to a judge. Very rare that a judge actually gets in trouble or anything. In my case, I had psychiatrists and evaluators that recommended that he not be around her unsupervised unless he received mental health treatment. And the psychiatrist alone said he had antisocial, narcissistic personality disorders, depressive disorder, sleep disorder, and suicidal ideations. And it was all ignored by the judge. The judge didn't have to listen. And I have, said, what is, and from every other person that I've met along the way, we can report all these things in the ER. We can have the same nurses come out. We can have all this, but they can throw it out when it gets to court. And I say, what is the point of the rest of us if all of these reports you get there and they just have the ability to throw them out? It's disgusting. In my case, the judge was not held responsible. He was not, nothing happened. He still sits as so. Nothing's happened to anybody. Nobody was ever held accountable, or there was no responsibility on anyone's part. So that's why I do what I do. And the only way to change what happened in my daughter's case is to actually change the statutes of the law, which in Pennsylvania, there's 16 different statutes that they use when they're determining custody. And they all say that the best interest of the child is number one, but it's actually just on paper. It's not really the truth. They say that they compare the distance between the parents and their work schedule. They rate them all the same. So here in Pennsylvania, we have developed, I didn't write it, obviously, but I work with a lot of advocates that have spent their whole life dedicated to this, very smart people. I've done multiple studies. Things have changed over the years, and we're still in a outdated system. They aren't adapting the domestic violence aspects of custody. They aren't adapting the trauma. They're not trauma informed. They're not trauma trained. We can't even mandate judges to be trained. You can't even put that in the law. Like, we could suggest that they be trained, but there's nothing that can force them. So that's why you have to change the language of the law. And we introduced Caden's Law a year ago. I testified in front of the senators that are sponsoring the bill. The bill's 868, which ironically is the date of her death, Senate bill. And we here, it changes the language to include, this man's history was like no other, and he shouldn't have been around a rock, much less a child, and it didn't matter. And they estimate about 58,000 children a year are actually placed into abusive situations. And Joan Myers out of George Washington Law just did a study on, I think it was 10,000 cases, that when mothers or whoever go to court, it's usually women. It's not always. Men like to knock me for that, but it's not. This is not a gender biased thing. When women do disclose abuse, sexual or any form of abuse in court, they will lose custody to the abuser 81% of the time, which is a very high number, which means basically we're not believing kids, we're not believing women, we're not believing anyone. When I did eventually get a PFA, because he threatened to kill all of us on Thanksgiving, it was the hardest process that I had gone through. And I can see why people don't want to do it. People would rather stay in the abusive situation or not seek help because of what they put you through. Where you think people are there to help you. In order to get protection from abuse, you have to go down there at 8 o'clock in the morning, fill out paperwork for 4 hours. Then a lawyer that is hired by the legal aid goes through, rips apart your application. You then have, they either say yes or no. You then, if you are approved to go in front of the judge, you go and sit with a bunch of other people, and you eventually get to state your story in front of a judge. And I sat there, and you can listen to everybody else in there, and they would deny and they would accept, or they would deny and accept. My particular case, I was told that there was absolutely no way I was going to get it based off of a verbal threat. And I said I was willing to take my chances anyway because of what I had gone through with him. And he's threatening to kill people. So I got up there in front of this one particular judge, and I said, he's threatening to kill he threatened to kill all of us on Thanksgiving. The police were involved, etc. And the judge said, stop right there. We can't have people threatening to kill each other. And he granted me the temporary PFA, which listed my daughter's name on there. And then in 10 days, you get to go back, and then the other party's there. So then you get to go in front, you can either make a agreement or you can go into a trial. We ended up going to a trial. And I was, after 3 hours of testimony and voicemails and everything else, the only judge in my case that ever actually listened to me, granted me a 3-year PFA. And the attorney that they award you when you go there, whited my daughter's name out from the bottom of the part. So she was not included. And because it wasn't my custody judge, custody wasn't decided. So I had to wait another, that was November, 3 months to get in front of that judge in order to discuss. And then it took another 5 months to finally come to the final decision, where all I was asking for was supervised visitation because of the way he was, and not trying to take her from him. I specifically said in court, there's something wrong, he needs help, CAT scan of his brain, medication, therapy, anything. And the one the one evaluator, said that he did need mental health treatment, and again, it was ignored. So domestic violence is not taken seriously in the court system. They actually, most lawyers will tell you not to bring up abuse, which is completely backwards. If there is any abuse, they will literally advise you not to bring it up, because they will tell you you have a very high probability of losing custody. Anyone that you would think, like the police won't even get involved. Every time that they came to my house, he would force them to come and do well checks on me. But every time I called them when she wasn't returned, they'd say, take it up with the courts. But by the time you would get a court order, it would be 3 months from then. Like, what are you supposed to do? I look back now, and I should have lived in a cardboard box. I should have done anything to remove myself earlier from the situation when I was only there for less than a year. I didn't want to burden anyone. I think there's a lot of shame and victim blaming that goes on when women try to leave. They don't want to rely on people. They're financially stuck in their situations, which is a huge part of it. And I wish to God I would have burdened whoever back then, and I didn't. And I know that another reason I do this is I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't know the things that I know now. I didn't have access to advocates and all these groups, and I didn't know about narcissistic personality disorders, and I didn't know any of that stuff back then. That's why I founded Cadence Corner. I was alone when I went through this. I don't want anyone to ever feel that they are alone, that there should always be someone that they can reach out to, someone to help. A lot of the advocates that I work with, they rely on what's called the ACE studies, which I believe one of the doctors was speaking on earlier, and it's called the adverse childhood effects. And they say that we spend annually about $750 billion in this country dealing with the health costs related to domestic violence. Anyone even exposed to it as young children, or not even the one being abused, even if they're in the presence of it, they end up, the studies say that with shorter life expectancies, they're more tend to have addiction problems with alcohol, drugs. Suicide is a high is up there. They have a higher tendency of developing cancer, and amongst them a ton of other problems. And they say if you could stop domestic violence, you would literally save, besides the money, $750 billion a year in this country. You would save however many people's lives that don't have to, live with the after effects. I say to the senators, I said, if 750 is not enough for you, what number will be? The ones that aren't killed, if we don't want to worry about the kids that are killed, like my daughter, what about the ones that survive? They don't turn out okay. Most of them, some people are resilient, I understand that, but a lot of these children, they don't turn out okay. They end up in therapy, they end up with serious issues, and it's because no one cared or tried to protect them or remove them from the situation when we can. Since I've been doing this, I've had a lot of, I get a lot of negative comments, so to speak. I was almost going to cancel due to a recent event this week because I just don't know how much more I can take. Just, you know, the continual being blamed for what he did and etc. I am blamed almost every day for him murdering my child. Things said like, what did you do to push him to it? You must have done something. You must have done this. You must have done that. And that is completely wrong. I was involved in the same custody dispute and I didn't murder my child. It never crossed my mind. I still don't want to kill people after all of it. So for anyone to be able to say that, what did you do? And that's what they do to a lot of people in this situation. When you go to court, when you're on trial for a PFA and they say, well, why didn't you report it? And it's because I didn't report it to the police because I said he would kill me, that somehow I lose credibility. And I feel like a lot of people are held back from that because no one believes them. I mean, you know, the police specifically told me, there's no way you're going to get a restraining order based off a verbal threat. I mean, you have to physically be beaten or this or that in order to get protected. And that's so backwards. It's another reason why a lot of people don't come forward. And as much as I was contemplating not speaking today because of the recent comments, I said to myself, I don't want anyone to ever think that they shouldn't seek help or get out of a situation because of what they may receive, the backlash on the internet or the comments or what people will say. You don't need to live your life that way. And in the end, someone's always going to have something to say. You need to do what's right for yourself and you need to get out of that situation. No one deserves to be abused. No one deserves to be murdered, regardless of whoever wants to justify it. And I sometimes ask myself why I do this and why I continue to do this. And I'd say I do it for her. That's the only reason. There's a little voice in me that continues to say, keep going, Mom. And until that little spark or that little voice goes out in me, I have no intentions of stopping. Our bill here in Pennsylvania was just recently moved forward through the Judiciary Committee, which is huge and a huge step in the right direction for those. This bill would have saved my child's life and it will save others. And that's why I continue and we continue to do what we do. That's really, I mean, all I could go on, but I think I've.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate you speaking about your situation and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Each year we have the solemn event of reading the names of the victims who died through domestic abuse the previous year during the Sound of Hope and Candlelight Vigil event. This year we'll be remembering and honoring these folks who died in 2019. Catherine Taylor. Alice Figueroa. Gadiel Perez. Thomas Connolly. Michael Chiora. Natalie Feliciano. Jennifer Dulos. Perry Mason. Monique Dominguez. Janet Avalo Alvarez. LaRonda Jones. Brandia Irvin. Christine Holloway. And one female victim from Bethel, Connecticut, whose family chose to have her remain anonymous. Let us share a moment of silence. O Holy One, we remember. We remember and honor the folks that we named and the folks who remain unnamed, who died from domestic abuse. We know that they are safely in eternity, gathered in your eternal love. But we ask that you would be with those who are left behind, family, friends. And we pray for all those who are affected by domestic abuse anywhere and everywhere. We pray that in their honor, that we would continue to struggle and to work to be change, to do what we need to do to bring about legislative changes, to bring about societal changes, to bring about cultural changes, that domestic abuse may one day just be a bad memory. May you fill us all with a sense of kindness, a sense of peace, a sense of justice, and mostly a sense of love, that we may work in the ways we can for the good of all your people, everywhere, for a good and safe and healthy life. Amen.
I can almost see it, that dream I'm dreaming, but there's a voice inside my head saying you'll never reach
the time, I want to take the time to really thank everyone who took the time and joined us today. Especially want to thank all the police departments, the North Haven Police Department, the New Haven Police Department. I'm sorry, most importantly, let me go back in order. Our President and CEO, Roberta Cook, State Representative Themis Clavis, Dr. Gunjan, the North Haven Police Department, the Ansonia Police Department, New Haven, East Haven Police Department, Brantford Police Department, Guilford Department, Derby Police Department, North Brantford, West Haven, Hamden Police Department, Milford, Mayor Cassidy from Ansonia, Kathy Sherlock, Shuri Baldwin Mohammed, Reverend Lucille Fritz, Natalie Murray, and Bob Pasquarel. I especially want to thank the team at the Umbrella and Hope Family Justice Center who really worked really hard to put this event together. And it would not be possible without the leadership of Jess Holman, our community education staff member. And I want everyone who's listening here to remember that if you're in need of domestic violence services, please remember that BHK, Hope Family Justice Center, and the Umbrella, we are here for you. Don't hesitate to call us and seek services. Thanks again for joining us for this event, our 21st annual event. Thanks again. Bye-bye.